Thank you. So thanks for everyone for coming. Really enjoyed all of the presentations and demos at the expo. They've been fascinating, and it's a real privilege to be here. So thanks for being the opportunity to be part of the conversation. Today, wanted to talk about the future of government and how they might, how different agencies might apply augmented reality capabilities, thinking through the processes if they think through them strategically and where it might disrupt public service delivery. I'm Christian Doolin. I work in the public sector consulting practice for Deloitte. I'm also a design lead in the Center for Immersive Learning and a former GovLab fellow. So a little bit about what is augmented government, and what is GovLab. GovLab is a think tank, an innovation think tank within Deloitte, where practitioners are pulled away from client service for a year to look at emerging trends and technologies that might disrupt or change the way public service delivery is provided. So about 2 years ago, we started looking out at the landscape of AR capabilities, many provided by folks in this room, those out on the expo, and we were fascinated by what we saw. We saw a lot of impact happening in industry, commercial industry, DoD, but one area we kind of saw is just still burgeoning was in kind of the non-warfighter modes of public service delivery. Government, beyond being one of the biggest buyers of tech, they're touching our lives in several different ways on a daily basis, whether you think about health, transportation, emergency response, security. There's a lot of different ways that the citizens interact with government, and we wanted to take a look at how AR might disrupt that. So we kind of took a scan of existing capabilities, visited MIT Media Lab, other academic labs, host of conversations with experts in the field, and sought to kind of group some of the basic questions AR helps a user answer, whether that's training and education, how to get something done, contextualized checklists, data capture, enhancement, how you can kind of improve that in the field, location, wayfinding, how you might be directed in the field, identification, facial recognition, collaboration, how we communicate and interact with each other, even understand each other, and then also contextualization. What we began to do, so we took a look at all the capabilities, the software, hardware capabilities, and we went to some of our client teams that are delivering in the federal practice, at TSA, CBP, FEMA, and we started to talk to them, some of our former government executives that work at Deloitte, and even current agency and department leaders, to talk about where they see, what barometer they see, what is the barometer for deploying AR solutions in the public sector. And we started to kind of get a few ideas from a design perspective of functional use cases of where this might be deployed. So we published a report, Augmented Government, and put together a video which I'll play now, and which we can dive into these 3 use cases. Again, it's going to be FEMA emergency response, Customs Border Protection, and TSA. Audio is not important, so good thing. All right, so I want to dive a little bit further into some of what you just saw and these use cases we've been coming up with. So first, we'll take a quick look at emergency response. A few capabilities we found particularly powerful and potential to be more effective in an emergency response situation when we were talking with our teams and the clients. When first responders are out in the field, they're typically relying on radio, text, and just basic forms of communicating with each other to direct their response. These are operating environments where just split seconds mean life and death. So, AR capabilities to be able to type and prioritize where resources should be spent to save lives are particularly important. So, as we've kind of seen in probably other domains, the ability to reconstruct environments, buildings or landscapes pre-disaster, to understand where people might have been collected in a building, also avoid certain areas that might be toxic and save the lives of the workers that are out there in the environment could be particularly powerful in improving the effectiveness and efficiency of first response. Another capability we're probably all familiar with, word lens, that text-to-speech, translation applications, anything that can be provided to a first responder in increasingly dynamic or diverse communities where you can reduce the barriers to communication could, again, narrow the gap in these moments where split seconds mean the difference between life and death. So moving on to Customs and Border Protection. Currently, it takes about 19 weeks to train an agent for the field. And on top of that, about 200 hours for language training. Substantive investment there. That agent is removed from the field. AR and AR solutions have the ability to kind of move some of that training into the performance environment to provide performance support in a way that might make the learning more effective and get agents up the learning curve to make them an expert the first time in the first time they're in the field, and rely less on the operating environment to become an expert. So, example of this is the ability to kind of look and see where in a checkpoint where a car might be modified, where there's chassis strain. Look at VIN number analysis, who the owner, visualize how the ownership of a certain car might have changed throughout history. All of this could be contextual information that might be extremely valuable to a Customs and Border agent at a border when making a choice and kind of improving the consistency and standardization of security. And finally, TSA. TSA is an interesting area to apply AR. Currently, a new TSO, Transportation Security Officer, is required to memorize a 600-page screening operating procedure. And then through memory recall, the man with a cane, woman with children, all the different types of passengers, they have to remember that and apply that. Now, there's eons of research about checklists and how they reduce errors in processes. Some of you might have read the Checklist Manifesto. Stats that say, applying a checklist in a process, a performance process can reduce errors by 82%. So for that TSO to have a checklist provided to him in the moment could be incredibly impactful for making sure, again, security standards are adhered to, they're standardized, they're streamlined, and it might even create quicker throughput for us in the checkpoint. Another important point here for TSA, behavioral detection officers are one of the most impactful countermeasures we have in the checkpoint. So the guys that kind of are typing sensory and behavioral things they see in the queue are really important. I got a minute? Okay. So all right. So let me try to wrap up. So collaboration through visual collaboration is extremely important. Could be a workforce multiplier in that regard. I did want to hit on some kind of quick dystopian, the other side of this, what it means for us when AR is deployed for the government. A few quick things. Information density. What does that mean? And can it lead to mistakes by a government official. Let's take arrest, for instance. Will officers be able to use information to justify certain actions based on random or spurious correlation? Could they, might an officer decide to arrest somebody based on the way they look if they are allowed certain information they're looking for from an AR device? What follows from that is potential demographic profiling. Again, if you're pursuing your own personal prejudice, AR could provide the information to let you make that decision. Another quick one, we've talked a lot about context here and how much contextual information that AR provides, but what about incidental information that's either caught in your experience or provided to you? Would a government agent be responsible for intervening in a situation where something bad was occurring or to do good based on incidental information they're either picking up or being pushed? What does that mean for the roles and responsibilities and freedoms for us from a society? Two more, and thank you for your indulgence, especially since 3 of 5 of us are here. So what about the enlargement of bureaucracy? What are the record-keeping capabilities for deploying this type of stuff in the public sector domain? And how will this be done? Will any instance of AR have to be recorded? And if so, does everything will we need to recreate what someone would have seen? Finally, last one is just more philosophically about government use of technology. I mean, philosophically, where do each of you stand, around the use of technology by government? As new technological capabilities advance, more and more technologies available, does government need to adopt all instances of technology? Do we want a government that adopts everything out there? I think citizens and corporations have relied on, to a certain degree, what I'll playfully term as government fecklessness to kind of avoid monitoring and intervention of our day-to-day innovations and advancement of technologies. So what does, do we set that expectation that government should automatically deploy any technology that's out there? Flip side of that, though, is, of course, government falling behind and being less effective, less efficient in areas that we need to ensure our own rights. So kind of along the lines of efficiency and effectiveness is where I'll close our vignettes, and kind of what you've seen here is meant to kind of stoke the conversation of what is possible. Definitely wanted to hit on some of the more contrarian or dystopian things. I don't think you can have a real conversation with just optimism. Hope is not a strategy. And I would put a plug in for this. Private Eye is a great comic by Brian Vaughan. It's about 70 years from now when the cloud has burst and there are no secrets, and everyone is kind of very focused on concealing their identity in masks. So against that backdrop, I will close.
Awesome. So I think we have time for a few questions while the next speaker gets up there. A little freaked out, to be quite honest, on some of that. It kind of reminds me of if you're familiar with the game Watchdog that just actually recently released. And for those that aren't, you may want to check that out when it comes to
this week?
Smart cities. Yep, and kind of a lot of observation.
Hi, I'm a volunteer here, but I'm speaking in capacity as a volunteer firefighter. And one of the things that I'm a little concerned about in seeing what you have there, especially the overhead map scenario showing where the danger points are, is how do you deal with what you don't know? That's a very confident picture showing a hazardous materials site and a flood. But one of the issues that we often have is we're approaching an area where we think we know what's going on, and it's when you encounter what you don't know because either someone didn't report a proper floor plan, for example, or my infrared camera can't show me a hole in the floor, and I'm trusting the image that I'm getting. How do you represent an unknown rather than what you think you do know?
Right. I mean, what you're talking about is a problem that exists now, regardless of the capability. So, data in, data